The Galactic Coalition Academy stood like a silver mountain on the surface of Villa Prime, and for 300 cycles, it had trained the best security officers in known space. Young cadets from dozens of different worlds came here to learn how to protect their people from the dangers that lurked between the stars. Cadet Eris Kothvelen woke early on the first day of the new term. Her crystalline plates catching the purple light of the twin suns as she stretched her 6 limbs and prepared for what promised to be an interesting year. She was Rathani, one of the tall, crystal-skinned beings who had joined the Coalition nearly 200 cycles ago. And this was her 3rd year at the Academy. She walked through the corridors with her fellow cadets, passing the small, burrowing Keth, who could see heat signatures in total darkness, the amphibious Valesi, who could hold their breath for days at a time, and the 4-armed Drelax, who communicated partly through color changes in their skin. All of them different, all of them here for the same purpose, and all of them sharing one important trait that nobody ever talked about openly. They were all prey species, the great secret of the galaxy, the one that xenobiologists had confirmed again and again, was that civilization belonged to the hunted rather than the hunters. Predator species almost never developed advanced technology because their solitary and territorial natures made long-term cooperation nearly impossible. They fought over mates and food and territory, and they never learned to work together long enough to build cities or develop writing or reach for the stars. The Coalition had been built by species who had evolved running from danger, hiding from threats, and working together to survive. Cooperation was written into their very genes, a survival mechanism passed down through millions of years of evolution. This was why they trusted each other, why they built their great alliance, and why they had created academies like this one to train defenders rather than conquerors. Iris entered the main assembly hall and found a seat near the middle. Nodding to her friend Kessex, a Valesi female whose blue-green skin rippled with nervous excitement. The hall filled quickly as cadets from every year gathered for the traditional opening ceremony. "Have you heard the news?" Kessex whispered, her voice bubbling slightly as Valesi voices always did. "What news?" Eris asked. "There is a human here this year. A real human from Earth. They say he arrived last night on a Coalition diplomatic vessel." Eris felt her plate shift slightly in surprise. Humans were new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 20 cycles ago. The Coalition had made contact with them and found them to be friendly and eager to learn, though there was something about them that made some species uncomfortable in ways they could not quite explain. "A cultural exchange officer," Kessex continued, "here to learn our methods and share human perspectives on security." I saw his file. His name is Commander David Chun. The ceremony began, and High Administrator Voss, an ancient Rothani whose crystal plates had turned deep purple with age, welcomed the new cadets and returning students with the traditional words of duty and service. Eris listened with half her attention while scanning the crowd for the human. She spotted him near the front, sitting among a group of instructors. He was small by Rothani standards, barely reaching her shoulder height, with soft brown skin that looked terribly vulnerable compared to her crystalline armor. He had no claws that she could see, no venom glands, no protective shell or spines. By all appearances, he was one of the most defenseless beings in the room, but something made her plates tighten when she looked at him. His eyes faced forward. This was a small detail, barely noticeable, but Eris had studied enough xenobiology to know what it meant. Prey species almost always had eyes on the sides of their heads, giving them wide fields of vision to spot approaching danger. Predators had forward-facing eyes for depth perception, for tracking movement, for judging the distance to their targets. She shook off the thought. Humans were clearly a prey species despite this odd feature. They were social, cooperative, and friendly. They had joined the Coalition peacefully and shown no signs of aggression. The forward-facing eyes must be some evolutionary quirk. Nothing more after the ceremony. Eris made her way to her first class of the term, a tactics seminar taught by the legendary Instructor Mollis. The Valesi teacher had spent 40 cycles studying threats to coalition security, and his classes were considered essential for any cadet hoping to graduate with honors. The classroom was arranged in a semicircle around a holographic display unit, and Eris took a seat near the edge where she could see both the display and her fellow students. Commander Chun entered a few minutes later and took a seat on the opposite side of the room. Instructor Mollis began the class with introductions, asking each student to share their name, species, and reason for joining the academy. The answers were familiar, variations on themes of protection, duty, and service that Eris had heard many times before. When it came to Commander Chun, he stood and smiled at the class. His teeth were very white and very straight, and something about the expression made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. "My name is David Chun," he said, his voice calm and pleasant. "I am human from the planet Earth. I am here to learn from your instructors and to share what knowledge I can from my own training and experience." "And what experience would that be?" Instructor Mollis asked, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "I served for 15 years in Earth's United Defense Forces," Chum replied, "specializing in threat assessment and neutralization. Before that, I grew up in a region of my planet that experienced significant conflict. I learned early that the best way to protect people is to understand danger very thoroughly." He sat down, still smiling, and Eris noticed that his eyes had swept across every exit in the room before he settled into his chair. The class continued, and Instructor Mollis began his lecture on the fundamentals of security theory. Eris took careful notes, but she found her attention drifting back to the human again and again. There was something about the way he sat, the way he held himself, that she could not quite identify. He never fully relaxed. Even when he appeared to be at ease, there was a tension in his body, a readiness that reminded her of something she could not name. His eyes tracked every movement in the room before his head turned, and he had positioned himself with a clear line of sight to the door when the class ended. Eris gathered her materials and prepared to leave. She paused at the door and looked back at the human, who was speaking quietly with Instructor Mollis. The Valesi instructor's chromatophores had shifted to a pale shade that Eris did not recognize. She left the classroom with a strange feeling in her chest, a sensation her people called crystal tremor that usually preceded danger. But there was no danger here. The academy was the safest place in the sector. The human was friendly. The human was cooperative. The human was clearly a fellow prey species despite those odd forward-facing eyes. She repeated this to herself as she walked to her next class, but somehow the words did not bring her any comfort. 3 weeks passed at the academy, and Eris settled into the rhythm of classes and training exercises and late-night study sessions with her fellow cadets. She learned about defensive formations and emergency protocols and the proper use of sonic deterrent devices. She practiced evacuation procedures until she could run them in her sleep. Then she memorized the weak points of 17 different predator species that threatened coalition space. Through it all, she watched Commander Chun. The human attended every class with quiet attention, taking notes on a small device he carried everywhere. He asked questions that made instructors pause and think. He offered suggestions that sometimes seemed strange, but always proved effective when tested. And he moved through the academy with a calm confidence that never quite matched the soft vulnerability of his body. The other cadets noticed him too. They whispered about him in the dining hall and the dormitory corridors. They wondered why a prey species would know so much about combat techniques and threat assessment. They asked each other why his smile sometimes made them want to run, even though he had never shown them anything but kindness. "He helped me with my defensive tactics assignment yesterday," Kessex told Eris one evening as they studied together. He was very patient and very helpful, but when he demonstrated a blocking technique, he moved so fast I could not follow it with my eyes. I asked him how he learned to move like that, and he said humans have been practicing for a very long time. Eris did not know what to make of this, so she focused on her studies and tried not to think about forward-facing eyes and too fast movements. Then came the day that changed everything. Instructor Mollis announced that he would be conducting his signature lecture, the one that every security cadet had to pass before graduation. The subject was surviving predator encounters, and the lecture hall was filled to capacity as students from every year gathered to learn from the legendary teacher. Holographic images flickered to life above the central display, showing creatures that made Eris's plates lock tight with instinctive fear. The razor-jawed Cressex with their forearms and armored bodies, the venomous Sithal who hunted in packs and used neural toxins to paralyze their victims, the nightmare creatures called Void Stalkers that drifted between space stations and struck without warning predators. Instructor Mollis began, his voice filling the hall through speakers hidden in the walls. Are the galaxy's great filter. They are the reason so many species never reach the stars. They are the darkness that waits between worlds, and understanding them is essential to your survival, and the survival of those you are sworn to protect. He paused to let his words sink in, his four eyes sweeping across the rows of anxious students. Today, you will be assessed on defensive protocols. I will ask questions, and you will provide answers. Your responses will be graded on accuracy, completeness, and practicality. The students straightened in their seats, ready to prove themselves. Question 1, Instructor Mollis said. List 3 ways to disable a predator. Hands rose throughout the hall. Eris raised her own, confident in her preparation. She had studied this material extensively and knew all the approved methods. A Keth student in the front row was called upon first. Sonic deterrent devices at species-appropriate frequencies, he said. Chemical repellents targeting the olfactory system. An emergency beacon activation to summon reinforcements. Instructor Mollis nodded and made a note. Acceptable. Who else? Adrelex offered another set of answers. Defensive swarm formations to confuse targeting instincts. Bright light bursts to overwhelm visual processing. And strategic retreat to prepare defensive positions. Also acceptable, the instructor said. More answers followed. All of them drawn from the approved curriculum. All of them focused on deterrence and escape and calling for help. This was the coalition way, the prey species way, the philosophy that had kept their civilization safe for thousands of cycles. Then Commander Chun raised his hand. Yes, Commander? Instructor Mollis said. I have a clarification question, Instructor, Chun said, his voice calm and polite. When you ask about disabling a predator, do you mean temporarily or permanently? The room went silent. Eris felt her plates lock tight, a response she had not experienced since she was a child hiding from a storm. Around her, other students showed similar reactions. The Valesi turning pale, the Keth pressing flat against their seats, the Drelax losing all color from their skin. Instructor Mollis's vocal membrane stopped vibrating. His chromatophores shifted to gray, the Valesi color of fear. The question assumes temporary disabling, he said carefully, for the purpose of escape. We do not train students in lethal methods. Chen nodded thoughtfully, as if this was a perfectly reasonable answer to a perfectly reasonable question. Of course, he said. But for completeness, Instructor, if we are discussing the Cressex specifically, I can offer both options. He stood, and somehow the movement made him seem larger than he was. For temporary disabling, a sharp strike to the joint cluster on their lower left thorax causes nerve spasms that incapacitate them for approximately 30 seconds. Alternatively, a high-frequency burst at 18,000 Hz disrupts their echolocation for up to 90 seconds, leaving them disoriented and unable to track targets effectively. He paused, and his eyes swept the room with that same calm alertness Eris had noticed on the first day. For permanent disabling, you target the secondary heart located behind the forward shoulder plate. The Cressics can survive losing their primary heart, but not both. A blade or projectile at the correct angle will end the threat with certainty. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I can provide anatomical diagrams if that would be helpful. Chen added Instructor Mollus's chromatophores had gone completely gray now. Something Eris had never seen in all her years at the Academy, Commander Chun. The instructor said slowly, "How do you possess this knowledge?" Chun's expression did not change. Humans have encountered Cressics raiders in 3 border incidents over the past 15 years. We lost people in the first encounter. We did not lose anyone in the second or third. He let that statement hang in the air. Simple and terrible. On Earth, he continued, we have a saying, know your enemy. My species spent 200,000 years as both predator and prey. We learned that the best way to stop being hunted is to become something the hunters fear. He sat down again, still calm, still polite, as if he had simply answered a question about weather patterns or shipping schedules. The lecture continued. But Eris heard none of it. She was too busy trying to understand what she had just witnessed. A prey species that knew how to kill apex predators. A soft-skinned being without claws or armor, who spoke of permanent disabling as casually as others. Spoke of emergency beacons. She looked at Chun across the room. And for the first time she saw him clearly. Those forward-facing eyes were not an evolutionary quirk. They were exactly what they appeared to be. Human was not prey at all, and suddenly the Academy, the safest place in the sector, did not feel quite so safe anymore. Word spread through the Academy like fire through dry grass. And within 2 days, every cadet and instructor knew about the human's question and the terrible knowledge he had revealed so casually. Students whispered in corridors and fell silent when Chun passed by. Instructors held quiet meetings behind closed doors. And somewhere in the administrative offices, urgent messages were sent to Coalition headquarters, asking for clarification about exactly what kind of being they had welcomed into their midst. Found herself assigned to a study group with Commander Chun for their Joint Tactics module. And she spent the night before their first meeting fighting the urge to request a transfer. Her instincts told her to stay away from him, to run, to hide. But her curiosity was stronger than her fears. She arrived at the study room early and found Chun already there, seated at a table with notes spread before him and a warm drink steaming in his hands. He looked up when she entered and smiled that tooth-showing smile. "Cadet Kothvelen," he said, "please, sit down. I brought extra refreshments in case anyone wanted them." She sat across from him, keeping the width of the table between them, and tried to calm the trembling in her plates. "You are afraid of me now," Chun said. "Not as a question." "Yes," Eris admitted. Because lying seemed pointless, he nodded slowly, and something in his expression shifted to what she thought might be sadness. "I expected this would happen eventually. I had hoped to wait longer before revealing certain aspects of human nature." But Instructor Mollus asked a direct question, and I believe in answering honestly. "You spoke of killing apex predators as if it were nothing." Eris said, "Not nothing," Chun replied. "Never nothing. Every life has value, even the lives of those who hunt others. But when a predator threatens my people, my friends, my family, I will do what is necessary to stop them. This is not cruelty. This is protection." The other study group members arrived over the next few minutes, a mix of species who all showed the same nervous tension that Eris felt. They sat as far from Chun as the small room allowed and focused on their materials with exaggerated attention. Chun made no comment on their behavior. He simply began the study session. explaining concepts and answering questions with the same patient kindness he had shown since his arrival. By the end of the first hour, the tension had eased slightly. And by the end of the second hour, two of the students had moved their chairs closer to hear him better when the session ended and the others had left. Eris lingered behind. "May I ask you something, Commander?" "David," he said. "Please call me David." "And yes, you may ask me anything." She gathered her courage and spoke the question that had haunted her since that day in the lecture hall. "What are humans, truly? We thought you were prey like us, cooperative and peaceful, but you know how to kill predators and you speak of it without fear. Your eyes face forward like a hunter's eyes. Your smile shows your teeth like a threat display. What are you?" Chun was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as if seeing something far beyond the walls of the study room. "We are something the galaxy has not seen before," he said finally. "We are predators who learn to cooperate, hunters who built civilizations, killers who created art and music and poetry about love and compassion." He met her eyes, and she saw no malice there, only a deep and weary understanding. For 200,000 years, humans were hunted by creatures stronger and faster and deadlier than ourselves. We had no armor, no venom, no claws worth mentioning. We were soft and slow and seemingly helpless. But you survived. Eris said, "We did more than survive." Chun replied, "We learned. We watched the predators that hunted us, and we studied their methods. We developed weapons from stone and wood. We created traps and snares. We learned to hunt in groups, to communicate silently, to plan attacks across days and weeks." He leaned forward slightly, and his voice grew quieter. "And then we did something that changed everything. We stopped running. We started hunting the hunters. The great cats that stalked our ancestors, the wolves and bears and crocodiles. They all learned to fear the strange two-legged creatures who would not stop pursuing them, who could track them for days without rest, who worked together with terrifying coordination." Eris felt her plate shift as understanding began to dawn. "You became apex predators." "Yes," Chum said. "But we never lost our prey instincts either. We still fear, still run, still hide when necessary. We still cooperate and protect each other the way prey species do. We are both things at once, predator and prey. And that combination made us very effective at staying alive." "The wars," Eris said, remembering the research she had done after that terrible lecture. "The millions of humans killed by other humans. That was predator behavior turned inward." Chun's expression grew heavy with old grief. "Yes. Our greatest enemy has always been ourselves. We spent thousands of years fighting each other, competing for territory and resources and power, all the things that predators fight over. My grandfather fought in a terrible war. My mother died stopping a violent criminal. Humans have always carried darkness within us. But you also create beautiful things," Eris said. "I read about your music, your art, your stories of love and hope. That is the prey side of us," Chun said. "The part that builds communities and cares for the weak and dreams of better worlds. We are not monsters, Eris. We are simply both things, light and darkness. And we spend our lives choosing which part to follow." She considered this for a long moment, turning the idea over in her mind like a strange crystal found on an alien shore. "Which part are you choosing now?" she asked and smiled, and this time the expression did not frighten her. "I am here to learn and to teach, to protect and to serve. I choose to use what I am, all of what I am, to keep people safe. The predator in me makes that possible. The prey in me makes it meaningful." He stood and gathered his materials, then paused at the door. "You asked what humans are," he said. "We are the thing that happens when prey decides to fight back. We are what you get when the hunted become the hunters, but never forget what it felt like to be afraid. We are dangerous, Yes, but we can also be the best friends you will ever have." He left, and Eris sat alone in the empty room for a long time, thinking about predators and prey and the strange creature that was somehow both at once outside the window. The twin suns of Velar Prime were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. And somewhere in the distance she could hear the sounds of cadets training for a galaxy full of dangers they thought they understood. They were wrong, she realized. They had been wrong about so many things, but perhaps being wrong was not always a bad thing. The attack came on a quiet morning during a routine evacuation drill, when the Academy's defenses were partially lowered and most of the security staff were occupied with supervising students. It was the perfect time to strike, and the Sithal raiders had planned their assault with the patient, cunning of born hunters. Riss was in the Eastern Training Complex when the first explosion shook the building. A deep rumbling boom that made her plates lock tight with instinctive terror. She turned to ask her instructor what was happening, but the Valesi teacher had already collapsed, hit by a neural disruptor beam that had come through the shattered window. Alarms began to wail throughout the academy. But they were wrong somehow, different from the drill alarms she had heard 100 times before. These were the real emergency signals, the ones that meant genuine danger rather than practice. "All cadets evacuate immediately," a voice announced over the speakers. "This is not a drill. Hostile forces have breached the perimeter. All cadets evacuate to the secure bunkers immediately." Eris ran. The corridors were chaos, filled with panicking students and the sharp crack of weapons fire echoing from somewhere nearby. She saw a group of Keth cadets disappear down a side passage, their heat-sensing eyes wide with fear. She saw a Drelax instructor trying to herd students toward the evacuation routes while his skin cycled through colors of terror. She saw bodies on the floor, some moving weakly and others terribly still, and then she saw the still three of them rounded a corner ahead of her, their serpentine bodies covered in scales that shimmered with poisonous iridescence. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, their venom-dripping fangs extended and their hunting eyes scanning for targets. One of them spotted Eris and hissed, a sound that triggered every prey instinct in her body. She ran the other way, her 6 limbs carrying her faster than she had ever moved before. But she could hear them behind her, gaining with every second. Sithal were fast, much faster than Rothani, and they hunted in packs because they enjoyed the chase before the killer. Storage bay door appeared on her right, and she threw herself through it, slamming the controls to seal it behind her. The door closed just as the first Sithal reached it, and she heard claws scraping against metal as they tried to force it open. She was trapped. The storage bay had no other exits. No windows, no ventilation shafts large enough to crawl through. She had backed herself into a corner like the frightened prey animal she was. And now she would die here, alone and afraid. While monsters waited outside to finish what they had started, the door shook as something heavy slammed against it. The Sithal were strong, and coalition doors were not designed to withstand determined assault. She had minutes at most, perhaps less. Riss raised her defensive plates, the crystalline armor that was the only natural weapon her species possessed, and prepared to die fighting. She would not make it easy for them. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cower. The door buckled, metal screeching as it began to give way, and then she heard screaming not from inside the bay, but from outside. Sithal screaming, high and terrible, the sound of predators who had suddenly become prey. There was a crash, a wet tearing sound, and then silence. The door slid open, damaged but functional, and David Chun stepped through. He was covered in blood, though she could not tell if any of it was his. In his hand he held a blade that she recognized as Sithal make, curved and cruel, now turned against its former owners. His breathing was slightly elevated, but his hands were steady and his eyes were calm behind him. In the corridor, 3 Sithal bodies lay in spreading pools of dark fluid. "Are you hurt?" The Asketerus could not speak. She had just watched a single human, unarmed and unarmored, kill 3 apex predators in what must have been seconds. Her mind could not process what her eyes had seen. "Eris," Chun said, his voice gentle despite the carnage behind him. "I need to know if you are hurt." "No," she managed. "No, I am not hurt." "How did you?" "What did you?" "Later," he said. "Right now we need to move. There are more of them, and the other students need help." He held out his hand, the one not holding the bloody blade, and waited. She took it. They moved through the academy like ghosts, Chun leading the way with that predator awareness that saw threats before they materialized. Twice they encountered Sithal hunting parties, and twice Eris watched the human engage them with a speed and precision that defied everything she knew about soft-skinned beings without natural weapons. He did not fight the way the textbooks described. He did not use defensive formations or deterrent devices or strategic retreat. He attacked, closing distance before the predators could react, targeting weak points that he somehow knew by heart, ending threats with brutal efficiency, and yet he never seemed angry, never seemed cruel. His face remained calm throughout, focused and professional. A craftsman doing difficult but necessary work. "The primary threat is their leader," Chun explained as they ran toward the main hall where emergency signals indicated survivors were gathering. "Sithal packs follow the strongest hunter. Eliminate the leader, and the rest will retreat or lose coordination." "How do you know which one is the leader?" Eris asked. "The largest one or the one giving orders? Watch how the others respond to it." They reached the main hall to find a desperate scene. Perhaps 50 students and staff had gathered there, defended by a handful of instructors with inadequate weapons. Outside, the remaining Sithal were circling. 9 of them still, led by a massive specimen whose scales were scarred from countless huntsgen, assessed the situation in seconds. "I need to get outside," he said. "That is suicide," Eris replied. "There are 9 of them. 11 total attacked the academy," Chun said. 3 are dead. 2 more are incapacitated in the western wing. That leaves 9, and they do not know what they are dealing with yet." He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Not fear exactly, but a cold and terrible certainty on Earth. "We have another saying," he said. "Sivis pacem, parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war." "I have been preparing my entire life." He moved toward the door, and Eris followed without thinking outside. The Sithal leader saw them emerge and hissed with predatory anticipation. Fresh meat, soft prey, easy kills to add to the day's hunt. "Human," it said, its voice a rasping growl. "I have heard of your kind. Small, weak, barely worth eating. But you will scream nicely before you die." Chun did not respond with words. He simply moved. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Chun flowed through the Sithal pack like water through stones, striking and retreating and striking again, never where they expected, always targeting the weak points he had described in that terrible lecture weeks ago. 4 died in the first 30 seconds, including the leader, whose secondary heart Chun had targeted with surgical precision. The remaining 5 tried to run, their pack coordination shattered by the loss of their leader, their predator confidence broken by the revelation that they were no longer the most dangerous things. Chun let them go when it was over. He stood among the bodies with the morning sun rising behind him, his chest heaving now with genuine exertion. And Eris saw that he was shaking slightly. "Is it done?" she asked. "It is done," he said, and his voice was tired rather than triumphant. The rescue ships arrived an hour later to find the academy damaged but standing, its students and staff alive, thanks to one small soft-skinned being who had chosen to fight rather than flee, the rescue commander. A grizzled Rothani veteran surveyed the carnage and turned to Chun with a single question. "How?" Chun looked at the bodies of the predators who had come hunting and found something they had not expected. And his answer was quiet and heavy with the weight of 10,000 generations. They made a mistake. They saw soft skin and forward-facing eyes and thought they knew what we were. He met the commander's gaze without flinching. They learned. The Coalition Council met in emergency session for 3 days following the attack on the Academy, and the single topic of discussion was the human species and what the galaxy should do about them. Representatives from 200 worlds watched recordings of the attack, studied the evidence, and debated the implications of what they had witnessed. A single human had killed 12 Sith raiders, creatures that entire Coalition security teams had failed to stop in previous encounters. He had done it without advanced weapons, without armor, without any of the technology that prey species relied on for protection. He had done it with his hands and a capture blade and knowledge that no prey species should possess. They are predators. The Valesi representative argued, dangerous beyond measure. We must restrict their access to our worlds before they decide to hunt us. They have shown no aggression toward Coalition species. The Rothani delegate countered. Commander Chum protected our students, our people. He risked his life to save those who would have been his prey, if your assessment is correct, because he had not yet decided to hunt us. The Valesi replied, predators are patient. They build trust before they strike. The debate continued for hours, cycling through fear and caution and reluctant admiration. Finally, High Chancellor Morvith, the ancient Drellax who had led the Coalition for 30 cycles, called for silence. We have spent 3 days discussing what humans are, she said. We have not yet asked the human himself. Commander Chun, please address the council. David Chun stood before the assembled representatives of 200 worlds, small and soft and utterly unafraid. And he spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to hide. Honored representatives, he began, I understand your fear. I have seen it in the eyes of my colleagues at the Academy, in the way they flinch when I enter a room, in the way they keep their children away from me as if I might suddenly decide to eat them. A ripple of uncomfortable acknowledgement passed through the chamber. Your fear is not irrational. Humans are dangerous. We have the instincts of predators and the cooperation of prey, and that combination makes us formidable in ways that your species have never needed to be. We know how to kill because we spent 200,000 years learning, first from the creatures that hunted us and then from each other. He paused, letting his words settle. But capability is not intent. A blade can cut bread or cut throats. What matters is the hand that holds it and the will that guides it. Humans are choosing, every day, what kind of species we want to be. And what have you chosen? Chancellor Morvith asked. Chen's expression softened. I chose to protect those students because they were in danger and I had the ability to help. I chose to teach at your academy because I believe that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. I chose to answer Instructor Mollis honestly because I respect him and your species too much to lie. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who would not meet his gaze. Humans are not your enemies. We could be, if you gave us reason, but we have no desire to hunt species who welcome us with open arms. We have enough monsters on our own world to fight. We do not need to create new ones among the stars. Then what do you want from us? The Valesi representative demanded. Friendship, Chun said simply. Alliance. The chance to learn from you and to share what we know. We are new to this galaxy, but we bring skills and perspectives that your coalition lacks. We know how to fight predators because we were both their prey and their competition. Let us help you protect your people, and we will be the most loyal friends you have ever had. The council deliberated for another day before reaching their decision. Humanity would be given a new classification in galactic records, one that had never existed before because no species had ever needed it. Apex Cooperative Predator. Category Omega. The classification came with warnings that would be taught in every academy and distributed to every world. Do not mistake human friendliness for weakness. Do not assume human cooperation implies prey mentality. Do not threaten what humans consider their people, but it also came with an invitation. Earth was welcomed into the coalition as a full member, and human personnel would be integrated into security forces throughout the Alliance. Instructor Mollis retired shortly after the attack, saying that he had spent 40 cycles teaching students how to survive predator encounters, and then watched a single human make all his lessons obsolete. He spent his remaining years writing a new textbook, and the chapter on humans was 3 times longer than any other. Commander Chun remained at the academy for another 2 years, teaching a new course called Threat Neutralization, Practical Applications. His class had a waiting list that stretched for cycles, filled with students who wanted to learn not just human techniques, but the philosophy behind them. Riss was his first and most devoted student. Violence is a tool, Chun told his classes on the first day. Like any tool, it can be used to destroy or to protect. Humans have done both throughout our history. We have been monsters and heroes, conquerors and defenders, predators and protectors. The difference between them is not capability, but choice. He looked around the room at prey species who were learning for the first time that they did not have to be victims. You asked me once why I'm always watching, he said, nodding to Eris in the front row. It is not because I am looking for something to hunt. It is because I am watching over the people in my care. That is what humans do. We became the monsters under the bed so we could protect each other from the real ones. Years passed, and the galaxy Changedaris graduated with highest honors and rose through the coalition ranks with a speed that surprised no one who knew her. She was different from other Rothani officers, more confident, more willing to confront threats rather than merely avoid them. She had learned from a human, and that education had transformed her when she became the first Rothani to command a joint human coalition defense fleet. She requested human crew members over the objections of her advisory staff. They worried about predators on their ships, about the danger of creatures who knew too well how to kill. Eris overruled Thema, junior officer. A young Valesi, fresh from the academy, asked her why she trusted the humans so completely. The officer had heard the stories, seen the warnings. Read the classification that named humanity as apex predators of the most dangerous. Kinderis remembered a day long ago when she had been cornered by Sithal hunters with no hope of escape, and a small soft-skinned being had stepped out of the shadows to save her life. She remembered Chun's words about choice and protection and what humans truly were, because when something comes hunting, she told the young officer, I want predators on my side. Outside the viewport of her flagship, the stars stretched toward infinity, countless worlds filled with countless dangers, and somewhere among them the predators waited with hungry eyes and cruel intentions. But now the hunted had hunters of their own, friends from a small blue world who had learned 10,000 years ago that the best defense was to become something the darkness feared. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, Eris thought as her fleet jumped to light speed, was exactly how it should be.